So thank you so much, MR, for joining us. M. Rangaswami, a name that people resonate with. Such an honor having you here on this show, sir. Thank you so much.
Great to be here.
So if I may call you MR, would that be okay?
Yeah, I think this is a long story. I think in the US, they had a tough time pronouncing names and where you came from. So I just shortened it to MR. And that was based on an old show that was famous here called Dallas, where
Mhm.
there used to be a guy called JR. So someone made fun and says, you're like that character, you're MR.
Super. I remember when I started traveling internationally, people used to find it extremely difficult to pronounce my name, Gaurav. And
Yeah,
that's where they started calling me GRV. So I could resonate
yeah.
with when you're talking about how simple name in India could be a tongue twister in different parts of the world. So Amar, while doing some research on you, you have been a software executive, an investor, an entrepreneur, a corporate eco strategy expert, a community builder, a philanthropist. I mean, there's so much you do, and there's so many things that you've been involved in. I'm just curious, when you meet people, when people ask you, how do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I basically say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So I do a lot of things badly.
No, I think the kind of work that you're doing, I'm really inspired. So that is the reason I genuinely wanted to bring your story to a larger audience, because I think there's so much to learn from you. And with the swore that you bring everything so alive. And we'll get into that. So why don't we start with something really interesting about your childhood that brings a smile on your face today as well?
Yeah, I think, when I think of India and my childhood days in India, which I left 40 some years ago,
Hmm.
I think the memories that are the simplicity of life, playing cricket with friends, climbing a tree, doing the basics in a way without the media and all these things that are upon you today. That simple life, the nostalgia there with just doing what you could do without your phone ringing or looking at your social media
Hmm.
feed or anything is something I long for even today.
I'm sure. Interestingly, every time when I speak to somebody who has got 3 decades, 4 decades of experience and people who are doing extremely well in their own lives, something that they miss is what you are talking about: the joy of being from the middle class families, the joy of playing with your childhood buddies and eating ice creams, and as you said, climbing the trees and all that. So, thank you for bringing that.
Yeah.
So, Amar, you have produced the prestigious Enterprise and Software Conference, and you did not stop there. I mean, people invest their complete life to put together one community, and you did not stop there. I think I'm sure you are an exception there. In 2007, you founded the Corporate Eco Forum, an invitation only membership organization for the global 500 companies that demonstrates a serious commitment to environment as a business strategy issue. And then you did not stop there as well. In 2012, you founded Indiaspora to unite Indian Americans to transform their success into meaningful impact in India on the global stage. Just curious. I mean, how did you get an idea or a concept for building the first community to start with, to build a network? What's so unique about that?
Yeah, I think I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So, when you start one thing, you're always thinking of other ideas as well. But it's not in any kind of strategic fashion or anything like that. The
Mm,
way I did the first community was I had quit corporate life. I'd made a decision, and this is just going back a little bit. I made a decision early on in life to be independent, not retire, but to be independent by age 40.
mm,
And I was striving hard, didn't succeed. And then luck would have it, I was able to do that at age 41. So I consider myself a failure. I
mm,
missed my target and by 1 year. Okay. So once I'd done that and I started my first community, that was the first time I brought philanthropy into my life.
mm,
Till then, I'd never given money, never given time to anything that was for the public good or for good of other people in a focused way, right? So the enterprise conference was the first time I built a network with a model that was giving back, was 100%. So every attendee, including keynote speakers and others, would pay $6,000 for the privilege of being at this conference, being part of this network. And we would give all the profits to nonprofits, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
that was my first foray into kind of giving back and building philanthropy as a model. And
mm,
that made me feel so good,
mm,
building that, because I could hit up people for money and say, it's not for me. It's much
mm,
easier than to sell a conference ticket or something where you're making money, right?
mm,
So that afforded me this platform where the first network was built on giving,
mm,
right? And I wouldn't say it was something that came naturally to me, but somehow I ended up with that business model and it stuck from there on with that network, right?
mm,
So fast forward 10 years, what had happened was that the software industry, the enterprise software industry, which had this network, was doing well. And in the mid 2000s, companies in the B2C sector, the business to consumer companies, were becoming more valued and so forth. So I
mm,
took a pause in this network because I'd run it for 10 years and I said, maybe it's time to take a pause.
mm,
And that's when I had two young kids. I had two daughters, I think they were 6 and 8 years old. And I said, what would make me a good role model for them?
mm,
Being a tech guy or a conference organizer or whatever it is may not be the way that they view me. So that's when I started talking to people as an entrepreneur and saying, what should I be doing? And they said, you've done such a good job with your tech group. Why don't you do something like that in the green space, in green tech, clean tech, climate tech, whatever they call it? And so
mm,
I started looking into that. And when that's when that gave me the inspiration for starting the Corporate Eco Forum, which is a membership group of 70 of the world's largest companies, including Amazon and Apple and Disney. They account for $4 trillion of market revenues, that was the reason I did it, was for my kids. And the good
mm,
thing is, I think I've inspired them because my older daughter now is working on climate change and ecology and those issues in college, and she aspires to be a leader in the young generation, the next generation, to address all the climate change issues that our generation has caused upon this world. So I
beautiful,
feel good about that.
beautiful. Amar, if I may ask you, how old were you then when you woke up to this call that I would like to do something meaningful now?
I think that, like I said, the first time it happened when I quit corporate life at 41.
Mm,
That was when I started the first network. But my calling in life hadn't kind of evolved yet. But I think it started evolving when I started the Corporate Eco Forum, because that was taking on something completely different, but it made so much of an impact on the world. If you
mm,
could get large corporations to mitigate climate risk by reducing their greenhouse gases, increasing their renewable energy purchases, creating sustainable supply chains, that could move the needle much faster than civil society could or
beautiful.
governments could, because these were companies that really controlled the business of the world, right?
Thank you so much, Amar, for sharing that. As I'm just listening to you, there are two questions which are emerging through me for you. And I believe both are equally important. At least I would like to know the answer from you. One is, how did you manage to establish your credibility in a market like US? So I would love to know about that. That is one. Second thing is, you spoke about at 41, the only thing that you wanted for yourself is to be independent. And then in 50s, as you were touching 50s, you woke up to this call that I would like to be a role model to my children.
Yeah, I mean, it came naturally. I don't think I was looking to be a philanthropist or anything. At heart, I'm curious about creating things, about being an entrepreneur. And then I found my passion was to build these networks. So it came upon accidentally in a way,
Mm,
because I always liked meeting people, keeping in touch with people. And so it was a natural progression to do this. But then
mm,
the evolution was not just to do it, but do it as a force for good, you know?
Hmm.
So that came upon slowly as I started building these networks. Then I started realizing that these networks were doing good things. They were creating impact. They were making progress. And that's what excited me to kind of evolve into looking at things I do as a, and the means testing it to saying, is that going to make an impact? So whatever I do now, I look at it and say, does that move the needle? Does something make an impact? If it
Hmm.
does, I do it. If it does not, I don't do it. So there's a very much of a litmus test now that I use with things I do.
Hmm. As I'm listening to you, I can listen to a warrior monk, somebody who would like to make a difference in the world, somebody who would like to create an impact and yet would like to see the needle movement. So let's start with this question. How was it for you to establish your credibility in the US market?
Yeah.
And that too coming from India.
And so I think a couple of things, right? So the first thing I did was to seek out a group of trusted people who could help me. And and these are people from the industry. So you start with people you know because you don't know everyone. So you start with one or two people you know, and you socialize the idea. Then you co-opt them into being part of the group, right? So if you go talk to someone and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing X, Y, and Z," and they
Hmm.
see your excitement and they get excited, then you pull them in. Then you say, "Why don't you be part of the advisory board?" So you give them a role, right? And then they have their fingerprints on the project, so they know they're vested in this project itself, right? So you
Hmm.
kind of pull people in, and so that's the first step, right? The second step I did in that case was to say, let me go interview a larger group of people to see what their needs are. And so you get trusted introductions to people, you do confidential meetings or interviews, but then you also give them back something, right? So after these interviews, you write a report and you play it back to them saying, hey, this is what all you guys are thinking. This is what needs to be done. And so then the larger group feels that they've been listened to. So I think it's one of persuasion, involvement, pulling them in, reeling them in, and
Hmm.
making them feel like they're part of this trusted community, that they have contributed to it, and that way they're meaningful participants in a journey.
So it's a part of give and take. When we go there, we listen, the views that they have, put them on the advisory board so that we know that they are here to add a lot of value. And in return, the least that we can do as a gesture is to create something meaningful where they have their fingerprints on and gift
Yeah,
it back to them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And anything I do to manifest itself, you got to give it 10 years. In my mind, it's my rule of thumb. So if I start a new network, I give a 10-year commitment to it. So it's something that takes time, it evolves. You got to pull people in, you got to take initiatives, you got to do things. It takes a long time to bring a group together. So groups typically in these kind of networks, in a crisis, for example, they might come together really quickly, but they might disband after a crisis,
Yeah.
right? But if you want long-term impact, it takes time, it takes building trust, it takes proving things, and so I give a 10-year commitment to anything I do.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so I would tell anyone who's starting a network, don't just do it as a cool thing to do, you
Hmm.
know, and then in 6 months get disappointed and go, okay, it's not working out, I'm leaving. You got to give it time. So the other thing you need to do is you need to get a professional team with you, right? So as an entrepreneur, you not only look to start something, but you look to professionalize it, you look to scale it. And so these are not networks. I'm the only one doing this stuff, right?
Hmm.
So you have to get a team. You have to make sure there's enough money for a team to run the organization. So I've become, after the first few years, I moved from running the thing to becoming the founder and the chairman, right? So then you have dedicated teams of people. I have teams of people in all these networks who are wake up and every day they eat, live, and breathe and work 24 by 7 for the cause. So the
Hmm.
next step as an entrepreneur or founder is to find great team members, because none of these
Hmm.
organizations would be successful if you didn't have a team.
Yeah. You
Okay, so then you got to build that, right? So that is the next step. you know, is really professionalize, build, pay people, get the monies, make it sustainable,
And above all, keep them inspired in the cause that you
inspired.
really care for. Yeah, yeah.
And my teams, I think, sometimes they go, "Oh my God, you're giving us too many ideas." Because as an entrepreneur, one of the things is you're always looking for that next thing that can improve something, or the next feature or function or capability or whatever it is you can put into the network that would improve it, right? So I think part of being that is tempering the new ideas and stuff with running an existing organization. It's a fine balance between doing that and continuing the existing organization.
What is there at the heart of any community that you begin and that you run and you invest so much time and energy in?
I think at the heart of all the three networks and communities I've started is uh, everybody is committed to giving and sharing and
Hmm.
trusting. So if you don't have trust, you don't share, you don't give, that's a core part of the value system of every network I have. And
Hmm.
and analogous to that is the second quality, which is no quid pro quo. So you give without any any expectation of getting anything back.
Beautiful.
So if you instill those values in a community and everyone learns to trust each other, I think you've done your job.
So you're talking about care, you're talking about trust, you're talking about giving, you're talking about giving without any expectations. And you are talking in a world where trust is not an easily available essence, neither it's a commodity that you can go and buy. Now, I'm sure in the process when you would have started to walk on this path, where the essence is, where the foundation is trust, where the foundation is care, where the foundation is give without expectations, I'm sure there are several times where people would have misunderstood you. What's that something people
Yeah,
seem to
I think
misunderstand
it
about
has,
MR?
because sometimes some people can be skeptical because not everybody is open and receptive.
Yeah,
So I think sometimes people might look at me and go, "What? When is he going to do the ask? When is he going to ask for something?" Because
yeah,
if someone calls me for a favor and I help connecting them, I connect them to someone else, then they might expect that I need a reward or compensation. And so that might be the one area they might misunderstand me, because I'm so open in helping. They might think, so why is he so open in helping? Is there a hidden agenda? Is he going to ask me for a favor or ask me for something I can't do? So that could be the one area that people misunderstand me. But I think once they get to know me, they go, I'm an open book. They go, the only thing I do is to connect people, to add value. There's no reason for me to ask them to do something. So I think some people it might be skeptical, that they might think initially he might want something back, but they quickly learn that that's not my style, my
yes.
MO.
So you continue to do your own dharma.
My whole thing is uh, add value, connect people, do good, and don't expect anything.
Yeah. As I'm talking to you, this reminds me of my conversation with Mr. Manoj Kohli, who at one point in time was heading Airtel in India. And he said that there was a conversation that was happening between Guru Nanak Dev Ji and his disciple and a friend, Mardana. And both of them, they went to a pond to have water. And while they were having water, there was a Scorpio who will come and just bite Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji, in his own essence, will just place the Scorpio somewhere else. After some time, the Scorpio will come again, will again bite, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji will do the same thing. While watching this, Mardana said, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guruji, why don't you just kill it? I mean, what are you up to? And Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, as what you are talking about, that's your true nature. He said, what he is doing is his true nature. What I'm doing is my nature. If he cannot change his nature, when I know that I'm on the right path, why should I change my nature?
Right.
So, Amar, I personally feel that we need more people like you because uh, whatever little I could search onto you and the news press that is talking about you, the kind of awards that you have been bestowed with, it inspired me, and I'm sure you would have inspired a lot of people. But at the same time, I'm sure with every conversation that you would get into with these communities where you are meeting the CEOs and the business owners of few of the best organizations and so-called accomplished Indians in America, it becomes extremely important for you to keep yourself informed so that you stay relevant in all those conversations, in all those communities that you're a part of. How do you manage to do that?
I think the thing I follow is when I have conversations with anyone, let's say you spend an hour. I explicitly try to listen more than I talk, right? And the old saying goes, right? You are given 2 years for a reason, only one mouth, right? And so the way I look at it is, in any conversation, I'd like to keep my piece to less than 50% and the other person to have more than 50% of the conversation. Because then I'm listening, then I'm hearing things, as opposed to me presenting and me talking all the time, right? The me. I like to listen. So in any conversation, I think if it's 40% me and 60% the other person, or 30% me and 70%, I'm fine with that. Where some people, they want to monopolize the conversation. That way they're not listening to the other person. They're not hearing anything. Yeah. And so I consciously make it an effort in any conversation I have. I'm the minority participant. That gives me the knowledge. Now I'm learning from everyone, because we can learn from every person we meet, right? Whether it's a child or a senior citizen, they all have things that you can learn from. And so my listening is based on that. I can learn from everyone. I'm not the expert. Spend less than 50% talking. All that, I think, goes a long way for me to pick up signals. Hey, I got to change course here. I'm listening to this new idea. Let me try and implement it. Because if you're talking, you're not listening.
So beautiful. Let me just absorb this because while listening to you, it reminds me of Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama says that every time when you speak, you only re listen to what you know already. And when you listen to the other person, you get to know what you don't know. And isn't it this a beautiful way of
Yeah.
getting into a conversation? So,
Yeah.
Amar, I personally feel that the basic values that we have and the values that you're talking about right now, when you're talking about care, you're talking about trust, you're talking about giving, you're talking about listening to the other person, you're talking about learning from everyone, whether it's a child or a senior citizen. I mean, I don't think that these values are easily available in the corporate world today. And I will not say that it's not available at all. There are leaders who are like phenomenal listeners. But at the same time, I think that's the need of the hour. How did you pick up this? And I personally feel that your childhood plays an extremely important role in helping you imbibe these values and virtues. I'm just curious, what has been the role of your parents in helping you become who you are today and the values that you live from?
Yeah. I don't share this story often, but my father unfortunately passed away when I was 10 years old. So I was brought up by my mother and my older siblings. I'm the youngest of seven, and by a long shot. So all my siblings are much older than me. So I was brought up in a family where I was a baby, and my mother was my main force in my life. But I was also, as a young person, more of an introvert. So I would not speak as much, and I would be taking it all in. So I think that served me good as I grew up, because that's something that I brought on as I grew up. Was I was not as much of a talker as keeping quiet and listening. And so that's something that just happened. I can't explain why. Maybe because I was the youngest of seven and there were six other older brothers and sisters and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I was the more of the listener than the talker. And maybe that put me in good stead these days. That's all I can kind of look back and say, why did it happen? Probably that's the reason.
Hmm. And I think from there you picked up the value of connection when you have seven siblings around you.
Yeah, and the fact that I was not the dominant one. I had bigger brothers and bigger sisters, and all these people in my life. I was the little person. And so I think maybe brought that sense of you're not the big dog, you're not the big person in me, without me even subliminally, without me even knowing that, right?
Hmm. I don't know why I didn't want to ask this question, but as you're just sharing the story of losing your father at an age of 10, then being nurtured by your mother and surrounded with seven siblings, and today you are at the helm of building communities that is creating an impact. Just curious, in your words, hand on heart, Amar, as if you're not responding to anybody else, just having a conversation with whosoever you believe, it could be God, universe, nature. In your words, I would love to hear, what does connection mean to you?
Yeah, I think you know that is the most important thing in the world, especially these days when people are fixated on social media and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different products. Uh, that human connection, there's no replacement for that. And when you meet someone, you shake their hands or you see their expressions, and there's a connection that happens. A lot of it, I think, is above you. I don't know why it happens that you connect with some people and you don't connect with some people. And, it's a mystery of the world. And maybe there's a higher being that is making things happen. It's hard to question and search for that. But I think that a lot of times when you meet some people, there's a special connection. And I'll tell you one story in that regard. And I'm so fortunate because of all my networks to meet so many interesting people. And in the US, there's a campaign for some alcoholic drink or something that says, meet the most interesting person in the world. And there's this guy who flies off to and jets on vacations and does things and has great friends. And I consider myself as not that person, but I consider myself as a person who knows a lot of interesting people. I'm not the interesting guy, but I know a lot of interesting people and I get to meet them. And in that, I'll tell you what happened to me once. And this has stuck with me a long time. There was a gentleman who was 95 years old, a great, amazing saint of a person who met me. And I connected with him when he was 95. And I was friends with him till he was almost 100 years old. And that's one of the best connections I've ever had. And this gentleman's name is Dada Vaswani. Dada was a spiritual leader of the Sindhi community. One of my good friends introduced me to him, and there was this instant connection when he was 95. So I have friends who are so much older than me, who are so much smarter, wiser, kinder. And I built this relationship with this gem of an individual at age 95. And I used to visit with him in Pune whenever I came to India or when he came to the US. And I was all set to go for his 100th birthday. And he had a premonition, apparently, like 2 months prior to that, he was not going to be there. And he told all the people, look, I'll be looking up from above, looking at all of you. And sure enough, he passed away before he turned 100. But that kind of connection will stay with me forever. And I just wanted to say how you can connect with people, whatever age, whatever circumstance, that can make a difference in your life. And that cannot happen on social media.
Thank you, Amar, for sharing that. I could feel that. If you could convey something to Dada right now, what would you tell him?
I would say that the world, he needed to stay longer, but there are a lot of other good people in the world who will continue uh, making the world a better place, giving without expecting anything. Because I still remember once when I went to visit him, he says, MR, I'd like to give you this thing. And he picks up a gold coin on his desk and he gives it to me. And I'm like, why is he giving me a gold coin? I was just aghast, right? Surprised. But he was that kind of man. Someone must have given him a gold coin that day. He just took it and gave it to me. it, you know, that's who he was, right?
Hmm.
And I love people who do things without expecting anything or for no reason, you know? That was
Hmm.
beautiful. And once he gave me a rose, and I go, and he was the kind of guy when you met him, he'll say, "Mr. I'm so grateful I met you." And I'll say, "No, no, no. I'm so grateful I met you." He'll say, "No,
But
I am so lucky," you know?
probably MR, here's an invitation for you. Probably Dada knew that he's going to leave the world before you, and there's an unfulfilled dream that he had, and he would want you to complete that. Let's say if Dada is here in front of you right now, what would he ask you to complete for
I,
him?
I think I still remember he was a pacifist. He spoke about peace, Shanti, and so I think from his point of view, it would be to have peace, to make this world a peaceful place. I think that really is what I take away from my interactions with someone like him, who is special like him.
And have you found somebody that you're going to give that gold coin to as a part of a legacy?
Uh, so far, I have not had that feeling, so I still have it, but I'm sure at some point in my life, I hope I pick it up and hand that to someone.
Yeah,
But I think that comes with looking back at it, it might come with a lot of responsibility
it does, I'm
because he
sure.
may have had a reason to give it to me.
Of course.
And so I can't just impulsively give it to someone. It has to be something that I treasure to date. But at the right time, I hope I'm able to kind of pass the baton or whatever it is to give it to someone.
Thank you so much for sharing this piece, your conversation, your relationship with Dada. I think this is going to be the best piece for me from this conversation. So thank you, MR. Let me just invite you quickly to our rapid question answer round. So let's change the gears. And here are a few questions that I'm going to ask you without thinking much. Just shoot a word or a sentence at the max, right? A community that inspires you the most.
Community that inspires me the most. I think it would be, I can't name any specific community, but like I said, a community that gives.
A book that intrigued your interest in communities and building networks.
There's a book called Bowling Alone, which talks about how communities have declined due to television, the internet, and the media.
You won't believe that, but that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. But our conversation went much deeper. So if we might get an opportunity, I might get there. That what do you think? What happens to the Rotary clubs of the world? And yet I don't listen about them. And there are so many other small communities which are mushrooming every here and there, and they are doing reasonably well. Coming back to our rapid question answer round, a business leader you find inspiring.
Business leader I find inspiring would be someone like I would say Ratan Tata.
A cause that makes your heart sink.
Wow, these are tough questions. Let me take a pause and come back to that.
Okay. One regret in your life.
One regret in my life is I went to New Zealand where they created bungee jumping, and I didn't take the opportunity to jump off a bridge
Ah.
200 meters down into the water and be brought back up.
You must do it. An unfulfilled dream yet.
I would like to go to a few places I haven't seen, in the world. One of them would be Easter Island.
A value you won't compromise for anything.
Uh, a value I won't compromise for anything is integrity.
Okay. And would you like to take a stab on a cause that makes your heart sing?
Wow.
Or you can still ponder on that. We can come back to that
Yeah, I
later.
think I'll take a pass on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Or it could be a good question for you to ponder on after this conversation. So
Yes,
why not?
yes.
Thank you so much, Amar. Let's move to the third phase. And in this phase, we are going to talk about what can be done that could help people learn how to build communities. Because I'm sure when people would have heard that Amar is coming on this episode, they would be looking forward to tips and tricks to build communities. But before we get there, I'm just curious. I personally feel that one of the basic desires of human soul is connection. But would love to hear from you. Why is it important for an individual to be a part of a community, to meet and connect with each other?
So I think it's imperative that if you could do everything, everybody would not need help, right? So when you look at any human being, there are certain qualities we have that we're good at, and certain things we're not good at, right? So inherently, you need other people. That's just how humans are. So I think building on that, if you admit to yourself you're good at certain things and you're not good at certain things, you obviously need help. And then if other people do the same thing, that then forms a community, right? And when you look at even the old days, that's how when we were first created or whatever it is, there was a group, a tribe, a community that did things. They hunted together, they farmed together, whatever they did.
Hmm.
There was always that sense of, 1 + 1 + 1 is not three, but 100. So I think everybody can see that inherently. So I don't think there's any question about that at all. That you
Hmm.
got to have a community if you want to do well. I don't think any individual in the world, whether it's a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk or anyone, would say, I can do everything myself. They
Not
all have
possible.
teams.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think whether we are talking about reaching the moon or we are talking about climbing the Mount Everest, it's a caravan that begins together and help an individual to reach. Interestingly, it's actually the team that reaches there. So thank you for re-emphasizing on this that we all need communities, we all need connections. As I often share, the human brains are wired for connections. We look for a sense of belongingness, we look for connections. And when I was listening to one of your interviews and your conversations, in that you mentioned that anyone can start a sustainable thriving network or an organization. I mean, everyone really? And while listening to this, I had two questions for you. Would love to hear from you. One is, how do you define sustainable thriving network? That's one. And second, if you can just share with me, with our audience, what's the step by step process to create one sustainable thriving network?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, the definition of a sustainable thriving network is it lasts beyond the founder or the founding team or the founding group,
Hmm.
right? So that is a measure of success. Is the founder is gone, the founding board members are gone, but the organization, there's so many of those you can point to across the world, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's a Rotary or any of these organizations, it was probably founded by one person or a small group, and then it's done its course, and it's still around in some form or fashion, right? The other thing is, I think for an organization to thrive and be successful, it has to continually add value to its members. So it cannot be one where you're just contributing to an organization and you're not getting any value. I'm not saying you get anything in return
Hmm.
as a quid pro quo, but something of value that keeps you engaged, that keeps you alive, that keeps you going back to that thing. So, and that goes back to the core value of the organization itself, right? So the
Hmm.
mission statement of the organization has to be such that it can live beyond
The
its
founder or the
its
founding
initial
team.
origin, right? For example, at Indiaspora, this group, my most recent group, which is 9 years old, so I have to give it one more year to reach the 10-year anniversary commitment I've made. Is Indiaspora wants to be a force for good, right? So that mission statement keeps it alive forever. You can look at it 20 years from now and say, is the mission statement relevant to be a force for good, right? And so I think the mission statement of the organization is very critical as you set a community up or you set an organization up. Can it live beyond the initial reasons you set it up? Okay. That will drive the organization. The rest of it will come. Do you set up an endowment? Do you have membership fees? Do you set aside money to do certain things? Do you make sure it can last beyond the core group? All that will come if the mission statement is evergreen and
Hmm.
lives beyond the initial reason.
Yeah, yeah. And once you have a mission statement, then what are the next 2 or 3 steps to create that organization?
Uh, I think the mission statement is one. Second, socializing it to make sure there are enough people who want to be part of it. Obviously, that's key. The third, like I said, is to get advisory board or
Advisory
board
board.
members,
Yeah.
get that together. So it's a lot of it is intuitive, and like I said, I may write a book on it one day. Okay, so we can dig into that further, but it's not rocket science. To start a community organization is a lot of common sense, a lot of passion, a lot of desire, and a lot of cooperation amongst a group. One person can't do it all, right? A community means there's more than one. And so keep that in mind as you start something. It's bigger than you. It's not just you, right?
Yeah.
So a founder of any of these organizations has to think beyond themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think the mission statement, creating these boards and committees and advisors, putting together a business model that will let it thrive beyond the initial things, all that will come.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would love to pick up that book. So whenever you're writing, please pre-book one for me.
And I'll come back and talk about it.
Thank you. Emma, you said it's not at all a rocket science. I'm sure it's not rocket science for Emma, but it is a rocket science for most of the people in this world. Because entrepreneurship of any kind is not an easy road. If you can just share one of the most difficult challenges or the situations that you've handled.
Yeah, I think the key as a founder of a network and stuff, you initially go into it with your own ideas. How do you listen to people and reshape those ideas to accommodate the community, right? That I think is maybe something not everybody can have, that quality. But if you can get that quality, if you can improve your skill at getting that quality, I think that is key. Because when I started in diaspora, I went into it saying, I think this is what we need, right? Because you're the founder. But then in talking to 10 people, it has to be malleable. So I can change this or change that or include this or delete that, and really include other ideas, the greater good, to involve more people, right? So that shape happens only when you start, and when you're open to ideas and suggestions to make it malleable, to change it, to accommodate others. I think that is the key.
You're speaking about Indiaspora, and it's a non-profit organization. It's a network of global Indian origin leaders from diverse backgrounds and professions who are committed to be a force of good, as you mentioned, by providing a platform to collaborate, build community engagement, and catalyze social change. As I'm just listening about that, let me just read one of the latest news where it says Indiaspora raises over 1 million for COVID relief from the leaders in 48 hours. In fact, last year, you received an award called the Global Service Award at the Canada India Business Council's Awards. If you were to take a pause here and reflect on how have you learned about philanthropy up to this point, and what would you like to know more about that?
Yeah, and I think there's so much to learn in philanthropy because I don't believe any of us are giving as much as we can. We all like to keep what we have. We worry about the future, or we worry about our kids. and other things like that. And therefore, we don't give as much as we can. And learning new ideas, right? So, is it a percentage of income that you give, or is it the percentage of time that you give? That could be one way. The other thing is one of my friends has a concept called give till it hurts, because I think he
Beautiful.
says, let's say you give 10% of your income, it doesn't change your lifestyle, it
It
didn't
doesn't
hurt you,
hurt you.
right? So he says, give till it hurts. And he brings up the a story where there are two women in a hospital, a true story in India. They both giving birth. The first one gives birth to twins. The second one has a stillborn. Okay, what this is a dilemma. The woman who has twins takes one of her twins and gives it to this other woman. Okay, in my mind, that is give till it hurts. How can a mother even contemplate giving a child away, right? But do any of us in philanthropy use that principle? No. So I think there's a lot for all of us to learn as we undertake our philanthropy journey. And in my case, I have to admit, having been doing this for 25 years, I'm still at the beginning.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. What an amazing conversation, Amar. So whether you're talking about that the purpose did not come to you and it started to evolve, or your relationship with care, your relationship with trust, your relationship with giving, and the story of Dada, or the story of these two women, where and when you're talking about that give till it hurts, let's say if you were to reflect, uh, and if you were to give a piece of advice to your 21-year-old self, or when you would have just entered US 40 years back, what
Yeah.
advice would you offer to your younger self?
This is something a billionaire friend of mine who is a little older than me shared with me about a few years ago. He looked at me and said, Amar, the biggest regret I have in my life, I should have been a philanthropist much earlier in my life. Simple. At 21, I never gave to any cause. I never did any of this stuff, right? So looking back at it, really in becoming a philanthropist, earlier the better. Don't wait till you think you have to accumulate money. You have to be more independent. My case was I have to be independent and then I'm going to do things. I could have done it before that, but I never did. Right. So looking back at 21, I should have said I should have been a giver to causes and a giver in life much more explicitly, formally than what I do today. So that's my biggest regret.
Thank you, Amar. And here's the last question. Today, having done so much, having accomplished so much, having created beautiful organizations, uh, which definitely are into philanthropy as well, what do you know for sure with 100% certainty and surety?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing I know, and this is based on the $1 million our members collected over the last 48 hours, is the following, right? It takes a team, a community, it takes partnerships as well. Let me tell you what we did quickly with this $1 million, right? We encountered another gentleman, an Indian gentleman, who came to us and said, we heard you privately collected this money. Are you willing to, if I do a fundraiser, match the fundraiser with the money? And we worked it out and we did it, right? So this fundraiser, which was held this past weekend, actually used our corpus of 1 million to do as matching and ended up raising another $1.6 million. In the midst of all this
Wow.
campaign,
Wow.
a billionaire friend of ours came in and put in another $1 million. So we were able to take this initial corpus of 1 million and now ended up with 3.6 million at the end of the day, right? So it tells you the power of cooperation, collaboration, partnerships. So our group in diaspora raised 1 million, which was amazing. But by partnering with others, we were able to double, triple, that giving and do a bigger impact. So don't ever think of yourself doing anything. Think of how everybody else can help you.
What a beautiful case study, MR. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sure all the listeners who are listening, they would feel inspired to go and do some charity in their own capacities. I'm not sure how many of us would be inspired to give until it hurts, but I'm sure you have inspired many people who are listening to our conversation to give. So thank you so much, MR. It was absolutely an honor having you in this conversation. And looking forward to interview again once your book gets released. And I'm looking forward to read that and share it with as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. Great to be with you.